everybody, Giselle Grenier here from ArtPlace.ca. So we're going to be doing another book of backgrounds, and at the point we're at now, if you've been doing them along with me, we're working on the back side of the pages now. So if you're working in a bound journal, you can just continue on doing what you've been doing. You probably are already trying to, maybe you're going to fresh pages, you're not working on back sides, or maybe you're using the both pages as your spread. Okay, because I'm working on individual pages, it really doesn't matter. I can work on whatever background I want. So what I'm doing is I've assembled my book loosely, okay, just like a dry fit, just ideally how I would like to see the order of the pages go. And these little ones here, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to create probably another 6, and I'm going to likely bind these on the inside front cover, and I'm going to put eyelets in them. Not quite sure what to do with these little backgrounds yet, but so I'm thinking now what I'm going to do is this is how I'm going to see the book going. So I know that these pages here, I want them to be somewhat cohesive. And this one doesn't really matter because it's done on both sides. And this is my placeholder. So I'm going to be working on this piece to look like this. And the technique we're going to experiment with is metallic resist. Excuse me. So, and just to keep going, that I did put some wax paper in between some spots where it's a bit tacky. Okay, so on and so on. So I'm working on this one here, and I'm going to put a placeholder, put the Terra skin in there. I always get excited when it's that close to the project. Oh, that close to the project. That we have to start working on the other side. So this is the piece of primed binder paper. We were doing that experiment with, we did the ones with the magazine spread, and then I just used binder paper. This is plain old simple binder paper. The school paper with the 3 hole punches, okay, and it's been primed with gesso, and you can refer back to that video if you have any questions about it. So I have to remember now, it's this side I'm working on, and the page goes this way, so I'm going to be working like that. I'm going to be using the new Americana Decoupage papers, and I'm using the metallic type one, and these papers are really pretty. They're coordinated. They have a whole bunch of different kinds, and they're coordinated into 3 sets. It would help if I pulled out the 3rd. They're really, really nice. They've got some nice metallic bling on them, and the one I'm using is this one here. And these are nice. They're not super thin. They've got some nice substance to them. So I am going to be covering the entire page. So I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I am going to go slightly outside the page, and it'll just make trimming a lot easier. And I have a habit, what I'm noticing now is when I'm decoupaging, I'm going so fast because it was going through pretty bad heat that I was skipping some spots. And these folds are not going to be a concern. So things that you can experiment with metallic resist packaging. You can probably find a lot of stuff with packaging for the resists. All right, so that's what I'm looking at. I'm going to be using the Decoupage, the paper medium. Oh, better put that out of the way. Get my baby wipe. And I'm using a dry 1-inch wash brush. This is the Aqualon brush. It's got the cut on the side here. And this video is going to be done in real time. I'm not going to speed anything up, so you can see the entire process, including any, to put it politely, screw-ups that I make. These are all experiments. There is no right or wrong way to do it unless you're doing something chemically wrong. Like you can't put acrylic paint over oil paint, but we're not doing oils, so just experiment and have fun. And you know one way to look at it? Welcome mistakes. Welcome things that go wrong, because that's how you learn. If you never make a mistake, you won't learn. And this is all about having fun. All right. So just offside. And I put enough on there that I can manipulate the paper a little bit. How am I here? How am I here? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to sneeze. There we go. What I don't want to do is get decoupage medium on top, and my pattern's a little bit off, but that's okay. I don't want to get any decoupage medium on the paper, because the decoupage medium would then interfere with the metallic resist. See? So when I pulled it up and put it back down, so you've got some stuff seeping through, that's fine. It looks wet, it's going to be clear. We can actually start working on this right away. I'm making sure they've got good pressure. Let me get my scraping tool. I like using, this is a texture tool from Decoupage as well, and I like using this when a credit card sometimes will be too hard. This is a very flexible piece of plastic, and it helps to press everything down. If I use my hands sometimes, because there's moisture in your hands, there's moisture on the paper, and I've torn some papers sometimes. This is very quick drying. Take your time when doing this. You don't want to get any medium on the actual paper. Now I'm just going to make sure that I've done all my corners. Decoupaging stuff is not my strong suit, nor do I pretend to make it my strong suit. I always end up touching the stuff up later anyways. So I'm going to leave that like that. And what we're going to be doing is on this piece, and I actually could put a little bit of gesso just to further try the experiment. What we're going to be doing is applying transparent paint over everything, and we're going to be using our finger to finger paint. If you don't want to use your fingers, then use a brush. So these are the colors here. I want to talk about this one. So it's a Decoupage Media Fluid Acrylics. They are, like I said, they're very fluid, so they're not too thick, so they can let you work fast, and they rely more on the transparent side, except when you've got, you know, the dark gray, it's opaque, and Titan Buff is opaque, whereas all these transparent, transparent, semi-transparent, and semi-transparent. One of the things that I love about the Decou-Art, these high-end paints, is that they've got the pigment numbers written on the back. So if I create a design, let's say this design here, and I want to use the Traditions paints, they're all intermixable. Okay, Hansa Yellow Medium is, you've got the PY6 and PY73. Those pigments are the same. So I can go to the Traditions and pull out those colors as well. And for something that is not available in a Traditions line, I can color mix it myself. Speaking about color mixing, the dark gray value is only because I'm too lazy to mix it up myself, but it's dark gray. You think gray, black and white. Not necessarily, because you can have a gray that's on the cooler side of the color wheel or on the warmer side of the color wheel. So this one here is more on the warmer side, and it's made with black, brown, and white. Which brown? PBR7 is a wide variety of browns. You've got the burnt sienna, burnt umber, raw umber, and all those in your... So you have to experiment. And I'm thinking this likely might be... I would mix it with burnt umber to warm it up. And if you want to keep it cool, use raw umber. All right, I got a little pouncer, which is going to be for this and sequin waste. And I can never pronounce the name Punchinella. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Maybe you guys can comment and let me know if I'm pronouncing it right. I used to laugh when I would see these on videos a gazillion years ago, and how just find a stencil. I can't find a stencil with holes like this, and I actually should send this to Decou-Art saying, please create a stencil like this, because now it makes it. It's because there's so much paint on it, and I don't wash these. It's hard to see. So very few tools in today's lesson. I'm going to start with Hansa, and I think I am going to be using not a brush. Let's try with a cosmetic sponge. I was going to use my fingers, and let's see, we'll put a dot of paint there, and a dot of paint there, and a dot of paint there. Let's try first with our fingers. And I'm going to go right to the edge, and I am going to be cleaning up as I go. Now, as you're painting, you're going to get paint on your mat. If you've got something painted on the back side, just make sure you do clean up. And if necessary, put some masking tape on the back side. And I am going to use my sponge instead of my finger. Oh, I could have tried a sea sponge. The key here is, and the reason why I switched from my fingers is because of friction. You don't want to create too much friction on this because this is paper. You don't want to lift it up. Now we'll go to Derelid Yellow, and you'll notice that the colors that I chose, other than the green, are next to each other on the color wheel. And then we've got this one, which is, you've got, on the color wheel, it actually goes this way. So they all work together, even the green, because there's yellow in the green. And then the Derelid Yellow. The Derelid Yellow, I'm just going to put here. And there's no real rhyme or reason as to the order. I can use the same sponge. Just keep it transparent. It won't get contaminated because they are next to each other on the color wheel. Oops, you guys can't see. Remember, keep the friction to a minimum. And when this gets like full of paint, and just take a paper towel and just kind of squeeze the paint out. You're not going to get it all out, but it'll get rid of the excess. I'll go to the orange. Now I have to say that this orange makes me nervous because this, I work with cadmium orange all the time with my oil paints, and this is a mixture of PO13, PY175, and PW6. So it's not a true cadmium, because cadmium colors are toxic if you inhale the pigments. So if this was true cat orange and you were sanding and you would inhale the pigments, that's not good for you. But just putting pure cat orange on the on your canvas or whatever, that's fine. It's a mix, so I know what the colors are, but every time there's an actual premix color, I get a little bit nervous when I haven't used it before, or if I know what the true pigment's supposed to do and the mix doesn't. And this one's really intense, so I'm going to have to knock that down a little bit. I am going to have to knock that down a bit. That's really vibrant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another baby wipe, and I'm just going to very quickly distress this a little bit, not too much because the paper is getting wet. And I'll just use the baby wipe on this one. And it's already starting to pull up. This is paper products, don't forget. Nothing you can do will, unless you put the decoupage on top, but I didn't want to do that. Because what's happening as the paint is going on there, it's resisting the metallics. Keep it fun. Make sure to go right to the edge. And anywhere where the paper came up, I can always embellish it. Let's see how it's resisting the paint. Now the experiment you could do to further push this is to use gesso on this, and then you can do some rub outs a bit stronger. Another way you can replicate this with paint is gesso, and then use a metallic paint through a stencil. That'll work. Oops, that's too much paint there. So I'm going to get a fresh sponge. Green gold light, extremely transparent. The paper's coming up a bit there. So you want to keep the friction down to a minimum, and you want to keep the rubbing to a minimum. I love the green gold in the fluid acrylic line because it's so transparent, yet if you just put enough layers on there, you can make it a little bit more opaque. And I'm just going to hit that a little bit. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? That is beautiful. So at this point now I can take a look and say, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. So I can come in, because there's still paint on here, and gently, there's something vibrating on my table as I'm doing this. I think it's all my pencils. And you can just lightly rub a little bit. And because the paint is semi-transparent, you're going to have optical color mixing. So the yellows, Derelid yellow and Hansa yellow medium are going to show through this orange. That's that. How quick was that background? Super quick. This is where I can just keep working. This is where it's going to get interesting. So I'm going to create just a variety of patterns on this, and you could push some of this in the back by adding some paint to it. And I'm thinking, now I'm going to show you how to do this. If we were to use another sponge, let's say Titan Buff. Now Titan Buff is opaque. And let's say I want to do it, oh, let's just pretend here. So if you get an opaque paint, and then you can push the background, push everything into the background a little bit more. It just knocks it down. Again, keep your pressure to a minimum. And a way that you could avoid, tearing your paper is once you've got your paint down to what you want, you apply a layer of medium. Because now as we keep putting on layers and layers and layers, it's paint. It's not, you're not working directly on paper. Now, see how fast that dried? That dried really fast. So you can push in a little bit of that. Where is that? Yeah, I'm going to be trimming that. It's okay. Oh, kids are getting ready for school. It's really early. It's only 6:15. See how you push that back? So this would have been the same technique if you would have used the gesso. So what I want to show you now, if we were to take that same, let's take the Derlid yellow, put that on top, just to show you. It's a completely different look when you're using paint on top of something opaque. You just have to make sure that this white layer here is dry. And that's to show you, see, now there's not so much of a resist because you applied the opaque color on top and we weren't doing any heavy duty rubbing. And then you can take a baby wipe, again being very, very careful, and you can remove some of that paint. Like tore the paper a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's just another thing that you can do with color. So I think if I were to do this again, let's see. If I were to do this again, I think I would do the collage, let it completely dry. Because I have a funny feeling, because the collage is coming through the paper, that's why it's tearing in some spots, because it's wet. So that's fine. So it's a Titan Buff there, and the dark gray value here. I'm going to put that on top. So pre-planning in here in this corner, I'm going to work with this still Titan Buff. I can just use this sponge here with the dark gray. I lied. I'm going to use the pouncer because it'll be even pressure. And I'm going to check it first. And I just want something very, very subtle. Very, 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 very subtle. Now I'll go to the other side. And I was going to use this. I have a habit of getting the corners caught in this, so yeah. And this is another way of really pushing things back. See, it really just pushes it back. You can do this as much as you want. You can do the entire page if you want, because it's so subtle. I wouldn't cover the entire page. I would leave some of the metallic exposed. And you can choose where you want your light and darks to appear. Just make sure you keep the paint thin. If you're doing this with a thick stencil, like if I were to use the Americana Decor stencils, that's going to be too dark. Oh, that's actually not bad. Fluid paint sometimes will seep underneath. You can go with a thicker paint if you want a more opaque coverage on the stencil. Like some would say, oh, just use 2 layers, but you have to leave your stencil down. And for something like this, I don't want to spend 3 hours trying to reposition it. And I'm also overlapping. I'm putting some of that gray. And then right on top, going back in some spots. Oh, too much. Too much, too much, too much. Oh, that's actually not too bad. But you know how we can, if you've put too much paint on there, you know what you can do to fix that? Wipe it back. It's actually kind of pretty. But you would just take a baby wipe and just wipe that back. And that's basically all there is to this particular background. Just to create something really fast that's somewhat coordinated with the facing page. But if you've been working with a actual bound journal and you've got you're working with journal spreads, so you're working on 2 pages at once, then you're okay. But again, with this, it doesn't have to be coordinated because this is basically, it's a book of backgrounds, it's a book of experiments, and then you get inspired by these backgrounds to create art. And for those of you who've been following, you know that when I create my formal what I call my formal art, my landscapes, my portraits, I'll do something called a pochade, which is a quick study painting. And so, before I actually, Buck Paulson became my mentor, and it was him that I really learned about the value of a pochade. I was calling them before throwaways, a throwaway painting. And he really taught me the value of a pochade. And so you can think of your book of backgrounds, and then the second part, and I think I'm going to be renaming the series the Bob and Boa, which is the book of backgrounds, which would then become a book of art instead of Bob and Doug, because doing your unusual genre, I don't know about that. You can think of, the book of backgrounds as your things for inspiration, and then the second phase where you actually create the art is your pochade, and then you make your notes in that, and then when you create your art, then you can take that idea and then create on canvas. Or I was getting to the point with canvases, I'm looking at my closet now, and it's got to be about 150 canvases and wood panels in there, and that's down a lot from before, because I was just using canvases and canvases and canvases for studies and stuff. Now I just do everything in a journal. All the experiments are in a journal. I'm going to get a couple pieces of dark spots, and then we're finished. So the book of backgrounds, again, there's no right way or wrong way. It's all about experiments. So don't get frustrated if something doesn't work out, because that's a good thing. It's better that it be done, the experiment, in a journal than on an expensive canvas. Just experiment and have fun. Then framing the piece. And then once this is finished, I can apply a layer of matte medium to seal it, because an idea that I have for this might require a lot more painting, and I don't want the paper to be torn anymore. There we go. Put that in water, and I would usually just grab all this stuff and put it into a journal, but we got time factor here. Where are we? Oh, darn. Oh, reaching. Matte medium, a little brush. That's dry already. And just, oopsie, a nice thin layer. And don't overwork it. When I'm using the matte medium as an in-between layer, a barrier layer, I like varying my brush strokes, because depending on what I'm going to be doing after, the brush strokes will show up through the actual artwork, which I like. Varnishing, not so much, but for this type of stuff, yeah. And I don't want my brush strokes like this or like this. I want them all over the place. Because it creates some really interesting texture when the light hits it a certain way. I don't know if you can see. There we go. So that's it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this little background, and although it was only supposed to be about 15 minutes, I just want to share with you some other things, organizing the book of background, how I'm organizing the book of backgrounds, the information about the pochades, talking about the paper. So I hope that you enjoy the little lesson, and I would love to see pictures of what you've been creating so far. I know some of you were shy about sharing your pictures, so you can just email them to me privately. And I would also like to invite you to join my private Facebook group. It's completely free. It's made up of, it's a small group of artists of all levels, and the information for both you can find at my website at ArtPlace.ca. There we go. So that's all finished. So I'm going to put that in my drying rack to dry, and then when that's dry, then I'm going to trim all the edges. What do you think? Do you think this is something that you could enjoy trying with the metallic resists? If so, comment below just to let me know what you thought of it, if that inspired some ideas from you. Give me a thumbs up if you want me to create more projects like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the Book of Backgrounds videos, because we just hit the halfway point, so there's a lot more coming. And then we work on the art on these backgrounds. Alrighty, so I'm going to clean up, get ready for my next project, and until I see you next time, stay inspired.